Good evening. My name's Julio Flores, and tonight I wanted to share what I thought was one of the more under talked about aspects and tools in a designer's toolbox, and that's design communication. So I want to go over what I think it is, and I'll talk about why it's important and offer some tips on how to get your message across when you present your designs. Oops, didn't go. Right. So, like Max said, I graduated from Cal State Long Beach, the industrial design program in 1997, and I'm currently the president of GK Design International, US arm of the GK Group. So GK Design Group is a group of design offices based in Japan that was founded in 1952. After the war, GK helped Yamaha Motor transition into a vehicle manufacturing company from a woodworking company, and it remains one of GK Group's largest clients to this day. GKDI, the US office of GK Group, was founded in 1972 in Santa Monica. So, correct. Okay, so I came to Cal State Long Beach after transferring from UC Irvine, where I was studying mechanical engineering. The program was not exactly what I thought it would be, plus the math was really hard, really hard. So I took one of those career center aptitude tests, and it said I might want to try industrial design. And the rest, as they say, is history. So after graduating, I worked at a few places, bounced around a couple different jobs, and landed at GK in 1999. And I've been there ever since. I initially thought I wouldn't have a chance there since I only had an industrial design degree. But luckily, I grew up around trucks and had a knack for the power sports industry that I didn't realize at the time. So after 22 years, I've designed everything from ATVs, side-by-side vehicles, to golf cars, snowmobiles, and sport boats. My main focus at GKDI has been in the off-road sector, with the recently released R-Max being my most recent vehicle. During my time at GKDI, I've had the chance to visit Japan many times over, and have also traveled to Europe and Russia. This wide range of experience has taught me the importance of listening to your client and making yourself understood. In the process of seeing these vehicles through to production, you end up having to present your ideas to many different groups of people. And in a big company like Yamaha Motor, you have to make the same pitch multiple times over to different parts of the company. So what I learned is that every group responds differently to what you are presenting. Each group has a different answer they need from you, and as a designer, it's up to you to give it. So being able to talk about your work and how you arrived at your solution is what design communication is all about. So here's a roadmap of what I want to talk about tonight. Design communication is really important. And why is it important? And also tips on how to be a better communicator. So let's start with how important communication is for a designer. So design communication is about communicating your design to any audience. In this context, I'm going to look at it from as an industrial designer working at a power sports company or a big factory or a manufacturer. So take that for what it is. Your situation may not be the same, but the overall principles will not change much. So it comes down to what are you trying to communicate and what are you really designing? So for me, design communication has been the ability to communicate your design's benefits to any audience. As my role has changed from a frontline designer to that of manager, my focus has changed to making sure we hit the unspoken requests that our client makes of us. My designers want to focus on the beautiful visuals they create, but sometimes they forget what our client is really asking for or forget to ask what they were really looking for. So design communication is telling your design story. As designers, we're tasked to find a solution to a problem. Your client is paying you to create a solution for them that's going to solve their problems. And articulating that solution is the most important job you have. You could say communication is your job as a designer. So especially when the requirements and stakeholders expand and grow as a project moves through an organization, you need to be able to iterate. You need to be clear about what you're trying to achieve with your design. So design communication is about communicating your design to also get feedback or buy-in. It's not only your vision, it's not only to share your vision, sorry, but to build support and generate a dialogue. So good communication plays a part in all aspects of the design process. You'll be presenting at all levels of groups, stakeholder views, collaborations, and at every meeting about your project, you will have to communicate your design. So unfortunately in school, at least when I went, presentation skills weren't a focus. And to be honest, they might have been, but I was busy, and I know how it is. You have other stuff that you want to do and you want to get to. So it seemed to me like it wasn't a big deal. But what I learned coming out of college is that presentation's a skill that you really need to work on, or at least if you want to get a job or move up in a design firm. Even more important is the ability to communicate and present to those different audiences. So being a great designer means you have to be a great communicator. Being a good designer is often being a good storyteller. So take, for example, Steve Jobs. He was a visionary, but also he could also tell a good story. And that's mainly why people gravitated to him. In that case, that example tells you that a narrative can be stronger than hard data sometimes. Being a good communicator for your design tells others why you made your choice. And if you can get it right, then your stakeholders will also see why your choice is the best too. So in summary, if you want to be a great designer, you have to be a great communicator. Articulating the how and whys of your work is key to getting agreement and approval at all levels of an organization. And getting agreement and approval of your work means your project moves forward without major changes or hopefully major reworks. So, as a quote say, every great design begins with a better story. So if you think about your design and how you want to portray it, it always begins with a story. People love stories. A good story will most times be accepted more readily than facts. For example, a penny dropped from the Empire State Building will kill you. It's not true, but the rumor persists, even though because it seems it's true. It seems like it actually could happen. To that end, good designers are typically really good storytellers. And finally, for a quote, a designer without communication skills is just a pixel pusher, because design is communication. At the end of the day, design is a client service, and it requires constant and effective communication from you to your clients. This is true whether you're an in-house or a freelance designer. Without good communication, a designer risks just being a technician. So let's move on to why communication in design is so important. Really, this should be called, why should I be better at communicating design? Like I said before, all design is communication. So within the process of developing a product, you will talk to many different stakeholders. So articulating your design decisions to non-designers will always be challenging. I've seen somewhere that it says that you will spend about 30% of your time creating your design and about 70% talking about your design. And that's going to be explaining it to different people, all within your organization and to different stakeholder groups. So the people you present to, the different people that you'll present to, will hear different things. For example, how you present to designers is going to be very different to how you present to development engineers, for example. Differences to other audiences would be the same way. So if you work on by working on your communication skills, we can bridge their lack of design knowledge. And then we can see eye to eye with our stakeholders and show them that we have their best interest and the interest of the organization in mind. So it's typically the hardest scenario we'll encounter as a designer. You know, businessmen aren't interested in color, scale, and proportion. They want to know if what you're proposing is going to sell. They want to know if they spend X, they're going to get Y in return. Of course, you don't know that, and don't try to pretend that you do. But you can say that with the information you have, and you can say that your design is going to resonate with a certain target for specific reasons, A, B, or C, or whatever those are. Be sure you have that data in hand and it's accurate. In my experience, executive meetings are very unpredictable because they will come at you from left field with just crazy questions sometimes. So that's when you have to have your prep work pretty much set, and you need to prepare for those type of meetings. So generally, there's four stages of product development, and they apply to most products, most things that are put into production, especially in industrial design. So you'll have an idea stage, a concept stage, and a development stage, and then production. So idea stage is obviously design, and you'll talk to designers, and maybe you'll get kicked off at that point. In the conceptual stage, that's when you really have to explain yourself. This is where you have to really communicate. You'll be talking to planners and other salespeople. And development side is going to be engineering, typically people who are responsible for implementing your design, actually manufacturing it. That's a different avenue, and I think that's probably where you're most familiar with. And then production would be an area where you really don't see your product anymore. It just gets made, it gets sold, but anyway, it's out of your realm. So the point is that those first three and a little bit of the production side, you have influence, not necessarily of where things will go, but you definitely can keep your vision, keep the design's vision alive as it goes through its way to production. So it talked about how you have different stakeholders in different stages of the production process. And here I've laid them out. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. So the point is that you are a contact point for those groups, and you need to be able to speak to those groups of shareholders effectively. Sometimes those stakeholders have to report to their superiors or to other people that you don't see actually in the process. So it's imperative that they understand what you're trying to communicate. And if you don't explain it in a clear way, those people can't champion your design to their people that they have to explain to. So this idea is very important also, is that it's not really about selling your idea. So the problem I personally have with saying it's selling your idea is that you start to pick sides and you instantly draw an invisible line between you and the stakeholder. Now, sometimes being adversarial can work in some environments, but it generally won't build the type of goodwill that you need for a good relationship. And building relationships is part and parcel important to doing a project as a consultant or as a staff designer. By focusing on the two-way discussion, you'll find it's easier to explain and get buy-in for your work. So it means it's about collaborating to find the best solution. So if you take the attitude of collaboration, you take away the it's all sales approach to design. You'll interact with many different groups as a project goes to completion. And during those meetings that you take part in, look at the meetings as opportunities to discuss the best design solution. This may mean you have to change direction, and that's okay. If you have a good relationship with the people that you've been dealing with, then you'll probably be kept on to the next phase, and you may be able to stick with the project. And that's going to be a function of the trust that you've built to that point. So that means building trust with your stakeholders is really important to your design communication. If you think of them as a team, as part of your team, then you can see how you can approach them differently. And also as a team mates, you can get good feedback from that team, which is also really important. So how well your audience can connect and grasp your solution will enable you to get really good feedback to improve and move forward with your design and with the project as well. So being relatable is also going to help you build trust, since you get what the audience is really looking for. And a lesson of that is you cannot completely rely on your visuals. Your technical skills alone are not enough. You need to be able to explain your process and talk about it in an intimate way. You know, sometimes the best ideas don't win. or even make it through the next stage of development. You'll see that a lot, especially in my field. You know, you'll submit something and it may not get picked. So your desk mate or office mate becomes the lead designer on that. And so you have to support him. It's not uncommon, it happens, but it's, you know, ego is what it is. You want to be the lead designer usually. So the designer who can best articulate the benefits and appeal their work will usually have that work move forward. And you can only communicate the benefits of your work when you connect with your audience. When you present to non-designers, you need to be able to talk to them in a language they can understand, or at least steer the conversation to where they can tell you what they actually need. So, you know, having the skills of working on your skills as a designer has merit. Obviously, in school, you know, you're trying to stand out. You're trying to build the skills that are requisite to actually get a job after school. And design is a competitive field. Sometimes the easiest way to stand out is to have a portfolio of really nice drawings and renderings. But don't forget, you have to explain yourself when you have an interview, for example. And that's really where your first encounter with design communication is going to take place. So in terms of experience, you know, not a lot of people have power sports experience. That's why when Max said he was in water sports, that was something I didn't know. And it's surprising because not a lot of people do this in terms of product, and even less so in color and graphics. And when we look for people, we end up, not many people have that experience. So we have to rely on their methodology, on their process, how well they can explain the work that they show us. And I cannot tell you how many times that we have passed on people that have incredible portfolios, but they can't tell us why they did what they did. And having a process and being able to explain your process in a coherent and good, in a understandable manner is very valuable. So what other people have said and what I would agree with is communication about the design is sometimes more important than the design itself. Your presentation and personality will be more memorable most times than the visuals that you present. So I know it's hard to grasp. I know it doesn't seem right now, but you know, you put a lot of mental energy, a lot of physical energy into your work, into what you present to people, and it's your baby, but you have to step away from that sometimes and realize that how you communicate it, as I mentioned before, is just as important, if not more. So let's move on to talk to how to be a better communicator. So now that you know it's important to communicate, now that you know that it's important to communicate your design, how do you go about it? Since your most impactful experiences will be in meetings, we'll focus on meetings as a context for the following. Now, you can find all kinds of communication styles, communication guidelines or rules on the internet. And I'm not going to try to reinvent the wheel here. I'm just going to try to point out some things that work and should be a focus from my point of view and in my experience. So the stages are the context of what we're going to present. So again, back to those 4 stages of the product cycle. Almost all projects will go through some stages that resemble this. They may be called different names. They may be segmented in different ways, but you generally are going to go through these 4 distinct cycles. And within each stage, there's going to be individual meetings. And each meeting can be approached in much the same way in terms of structure. But obviously, some meetings are just going to have a higher stakes than others. So before your meeting, most important, do your research. Who am I presenting to? Because once you know who's in this meeting, you can tailor your presentation to those expectations and who's going to be there and what they expect. Again, the example of if we're talking about product planning, let's go to the next one, sorry. If you go to who or what do they focus on, for example, product planning will want to hear how your design addresses the customer's needs. Sales and marketing is going to focus on whether it's trendy or saleable. Engineering is going to want to hear technical details that affect manufacturing and the cost. And finally, executives are going to want to hear how the idea fits into their brand or their idea of the brand of the company. So all those things, you have to take that into account before you get into your meeting, which leads us to making a checklist. So this is where you step back and you say, did what I make, does what I have address their request? And you need to reflect on what stage of the process you're at that point. It's a very basic question. I know it seems very basic, but it's also the most neglected. A lot of times we've gone into meetings, or I've asked my guys before we go into meetings, what were we trying to do? Did you actually do what they asked you for? It's the most basic and the most simple, and it really, unfortunately, is something that a lot of people forget to do. So your solution, how did it solve the stated problem? Did it achieve the desired outcome? And most importantly, is who you're presenting to going to understand what you're trying to say? To that end, is it easy to understand? So can you explain it quickly and simply? And establish goals. What do you want to learn at this meeting? Do you want feedback? Is this for an approval? Is this a formal meeting? Is this just to get technical feedback? Again, all those questions should actually give you an idea of, do you have the right materials for this meeting? If you don't have that, and if you're not prepared, then you either need to make them or risk actually ruining your reputation with the people that you're working with. So moving to during the meeting. So maybe you've heard this, maybe you've not, but the 7 C's of communication are actually a really good framework for presentations in general. And, they are good general sense, but I just want to focus on a few of them that I think are really what you can get out, what you can take away. So they're clarity, conciseness, concrete, correct, coherent, complete, and courteous. I've picked out 4 that I think are probably your most important ones. So clarity, for one, is being clear. So when you're in the meeting and they're non-designers, avoid the design jargon. Try to keep things simple. If you need to, get a gut check beforehand. That means check it with somebody you trust or somebody who's not a designer, like family, boyfriend, girlfriend, mom, dad, somebody who's not in the process. And do they understand what you're trying to say? It really does help kind of filter out, take you out of it and make you understand what you're really trying to get across. Another way to put it would be ELI 5. So explain it to me like I'm 5. That's definitely a nice how do you say, a nice expression to keep in mind on this. So concise, stay on point, keep your message short and simple. Long explanations, you're going to lose people. I've always thought if you spend more than 2 or 3 sentences having to explain something, you haven't explained anything. You've missed the mark. Coherence. So your message should be logical and aligned to the purpose of the design. I think that's pretty simple. So, and courteous. You should always be polite and open to any feedback. The third thing to practice during a meeting is to actively listen. So use your work to start a dialogue. Basically, that's what you're trying to do. The more you get your stakeholders to talk, the more they're going to tell you what they really want. And many times, this discussion will actually uncover the real problem or the real issue that you're trying to solve. And a side benefit of that is that you'll build trust. We'll build trust with them since they feel like they're a part of the process. And then use your work to start a dialogue. I think I said that, sorry. And repeat and rephrase. So repeat the comments to find the point of concern. Try to stay away from subjective comments and try to zero in on tangibles. So if somebody says, I don't like this, Well, okay, that's fine. You don't like it, but could you tell me why? Like, could you say, is it because this or that? Um, and then finally, you rephrase the comments to find the heart of the concern. So that's when you would say, I know you said this. Does that mean that, the radius is too sharp for you? Or does this you said that it feels jaggedy. So does that mean it's the corners are too sharp and we need to soften them? So stuff like that will definitely open yourself to comments and also keep the conversation on a positive note. And the fourth item for during a meeting is allow for feedback. Be flexible. So depending on the style of the meeting, questions can come up. This happens typically in executive style meetings where people will just blurt out what they feel, what they see. It happens. You just have to be ready for it. And if there are questions, answer the questions directly if it will help you explain your process. If it doesn't, well, try to steer the conversation away from it. Try to move it to try to address the issue at the end of the meeting, because you don't want to get bogged down in your explanation. And again, you want to keep the dialogue flowing. You want to keep the meeting moving. And finally, during the meeting, expect to be challenged. This happens a lot, and this can happen in any meeting, in all honesty. Don't take it personally. So it may seem like it's against the spirit of collaboration, but some people just want to pick you apart. This is the way it is. Don't fall into their trap. Be diplomatic. Try to answer the concerns and steer the conversation to a more productive path. Or maybe take the opportunity to explain things a little differently. Maybe that's what they're missing, is they didn't understand what you're explaining. Basically, do not take this time to fight back. Don't fight back in a negative way. Defend your work. So what I mean by defending it means explaining your thought process and your rationale. If that's not enough, then maybe you need to explain it differently, or maybe it's just you've taken the wrong path and you need to regroup. And finally, for remote meetings, this has been a lot more popular, obviously, in the last couple of years. Yeah, showing my age. In my time, the technology was impossible. And it wasn't an option because generally you needed to present face-to-face to accomplish anything. And that's what everybody thought you had to do. And that's what we did. We flew across the country back and forth, and we flew around the world if we had to present things. It wasn't uncommon in the old days to fly to Japan, present, and then fly back within a day or two. I never did that, but other people did, and yeah, it was brutal, but yeah, that's just the way it was. But nowadays we have remote meetings, so which is great. So the danger here is that your visuals are even more important. So you have to be careful about images. You have to be careful of what you show. So in order to mitigate that, I suggest trying to enable video with the slides for more human touch, so people can see you and see how you're presenting yourself. And it does actually help a little bit. Reading the room is difficult, obviously, so you try to adapt. You have to adapt to interruptions. Sometimes people flick in and out, video comes in and out. This is just a circumstance of being remote. Be mindful of your facial expressions. It becomes a performance. You can't, if somebody's talking, you have to show that you're aware and you're actively listening. Again, this is what we have now. And be mindful of your surroundings. That means try to control the situation, try to control the environment. You can't have your cat or your phone going off or messages going off. I think the takeaway is just be professional. My personal preference is to still have face-to-face meetings. I think you can get a lot more done, but different organizations have different priorities. So bottom line is try to make things work in your favor. Okay. And then we're almost done. So it's after the meeting now. So after the meeting is just as important as the prep and as during. First thing you need to do is do a postmortem. So jot down some notes after your meeting. Over time, this will be second nature, but at first it's going to be a little difficult. List what went well and what didn't. Again, seems obvious, but a lot of people don't do it. And it helps you kind of formulate your response for when you follow up. And it also helps when you actually move on to when you have to do the work, that you know what you have to attack and what you have to fix. And if it's relevant, make note of what the major players asked or focused on. So if, for example, the lead engineer really harped on the sink or the wall thickness on whatever your part was or whatever cowl you were making, well, you know, then you're gonna have to look at wall thicknesses. You're gonna have to make sure there's no sink marks and you design around those. Speaking of interruptions, and make note of the action items that were agreed on. So try to categorize them from high to low priority and try to follow up on the higher priority items as soon as possible. Speed is of the essence in this respect. So also after the postmortem, sorry, you have to do a follow-up. And it can be after your presentation, and it could be when you're sharing information and sharing materials after the actual presentation took place. Be courteous and thank them for the input, whether it was good or bad. Again, you want to leave a positive feeling. You want to leave on a good note. If possible, write a quick summary of what took place. This kind of grounds everybody and reminds everybody what was agreed on. And also, it shows that you were paying attention and that you're actually going to have something to work on and you are going to take care of things. And point out the relevant action items. And if they're yours, the time frame you expect to complete them in. I can't stress more. It's a little thing, but pointing out the time frame that you can deliver something has built so much good rapport, and being able to deliver it, obviously, if you give a time frame, make sure you can deliver on it. There's nothing worse than saying you're going to do something in a day or in 2 days and it takes you next week. Just forget it. Don't even, if you can't do it, don't say you will. And then finally, in your follow-up, don't use this time to make your case if things went badly for you. Just that fight will have to happen on another day. In the follow-up, don't do it. It's just bad manners. So to summarize, before the meeting, do your research, make a checklist. During the meeting, practice the 4 C's, actively listen, allow for feedback, and expect to have some questions. And finally, after the meeting, make sure you do a postmortem and follow-up. So finally, to summarize, ultimately, design communication is about collaboration and sharing. And it's collaboration and cooperation on a large scale. If you're a product designer for a major manufacturer and you know, your work involves a lot of capital and a lot of resources being directed towards one goal, everyone involved wants to feel like they've contributed. And the process is a lot easier when they have a genuine interest in the product's success. So communicating your design decisions and building support with those stakeholders ensures everybody can contribute toward the success of your project. You want to get everybody, like they say, you want to get everybody rowing in the same direction. And they can only do that when they share your vision and when they understand it. So design communication is really important towards getting everybody moving in the same direction. So a good designer can be a good communicator, but by putting a little bit of effort into your communication skills, you can break through to being a great communicator, and by extension, being a great designer. So I hope this helps you be a little bit more prepared when you step into the professional realm. I know it seems like another hoop to jump through, but it's truly a skill that's going to help you in your professional career. So the long history of humankind and animal kind too is that those who learned to collaborate and improvise the most effectively have prevailed. And that's Charles Darwin. So I came across the Darwin quote in my research for tonight, and it summarizes pretty closely what I'm talking about. You know, the design process is about collaboration on a very large scale. Creating something out of nothing and getting it into production is probably one of the most challenging things you could ever do as a designer or not. In fact, personally, I find the work that you have to put in after getting a design approved, after the conceptual stage, the most satisfying. Taking the 2D sketch and bringing it to reality and keeping that original vision and actually seeing it being used and being made and written on and enjoyed by other people is a feeling that, you know, I'm lucky to have, and I'm honestly grateful for GK for letting me do that. So, and yeah, I think that's it. I'm sorry. So thank you, and I hope that helps all of you.
You have a few questions I think the students are interested in. I actually had a question if you had any examples of where communication has either massively failed you and just blown up, or where good communication skills have kind of saved something you thought was lost.
Yeah, I think I actually have I had both. And it was going to include it in my slides, but when I first started out, I worked at a little design shop in Signal Hill, and we had to do we were doing trombone cases. So yeah, I know it's glamorous, totally. So, and the first one I did, we did a whole song and dance, and we thought it was the greatest thing, and then we presented it to the manufacturer, the guy in charge, and he's like, he's just like, what is this? You gave me a Homer. It was right after The Simpsons had the Homer mobile, and it was it's sobering. Let me tell you, somebody tells you that your work looks like a cartoon character. So that was a case of where we just kind of went off in designer land, and we just completely didn't address what he really wanted, which was he just wanted a trombone case. But we had, zips and colors, and I forget what it was, but it was just overboard. And in terms of saving it, one of my first side-by-sides, it was my first side-by-side, and it was a full clay vehicle, and it was a scale that I was never used to. I'd never done before, and I was just kind of thrown in on it. And our first review, the executives came by and were grilling me, and I was a little bit I didn't know what to say. I was kind of lost. And then the testing engineer basically just shoved me in the side and said, go defend yourself. That's what you got to do. And I did, and the project got canceled, but I don't think it was because of my explanation, but definitely it was a case where you have to step up once in a while, and that was a good lesson there too.
That's great. All right, we have a few questions. One is, have you ever had a client that you couldn't meet the adaptations for and maybe lost? So I know that you're more of an internal design, but I think you kind of covered with the trombone. Were you able, or the trombone case, were you able to come back and meet those afterwards?
Yeah. No, that ended up being my first product that was released on the market. So awesome. Yeah, we definitely went back, and we got the yelling at, we got the whole 9 yards, and then we came back with something that could be made, and it got put out there.
Curious, because I know out of school I had a challenge with this of you put in your presentation to not take it personally. How did you deal with that part of it? what is it, through mentoring, or is it just you're a saint?
Yeah, I can't say that nowadays I'm not so much a frontline guy anymore, so I don't, I can step back. Yeah, I think it's honestly, in my case, it's more of just I grew that callus of,
Right.
not focusing on what people were saying and just trying to, I think how I managed it was just trying to start the dialogue again. I think, is when you focus on trying to ask what they really want, I think you lose, you don't pay attention to, them telling you it looks like junk or whatever. So
Right. Right. All right. Do you find yourself presenting multiple ideas to a client, or do you focus your presentation on one idea, or does it depend on the level?
uh, yeah, that's a kind of a tactical question. You know, uh, um, Depends, if we have a strong idea about something, we'll definitely, not put so much effort into other ones. And you can also game it. I shouldn't say game it, but it's kind of what it is, um, depending on where you put your prime idea. Sometimes some people put their prime as the start of the presentation, and usually that's the one that you don't want to, because that, the client is just going to trash that usually. Um, we'll put our prime idea in the middle maybe, or towards the end, so it's kind of has the punch, the impact that we want. So yeah, I guess, yeah, I think invariably you have your favorite, and sometimes that's what they want to see, but again, you just have to go with the punches. Oftentimes they'll pick the one you really didn't expect or want to get picked. So
Yeah, we run into that quite a bit, and figuring out how to game, if you will, a
yeah, I know it's
client
maybe
is,
not the right word, but
man, no, but it kind of is a strategy, and figuring
sure,
out, okay, you know, I know typically we like to put first the ones that most directly just answered all the questions, checked
right,
off all the boxes.
right,
So they feel like, okay, they're comfortable that we've done it, but they may not be all that enthused. And then we show them, oh, now we've taken that and gone here with it and gone there. And that tends to be where we put the stuff that we're wanting to show.
yep,
Um,
100%.
and so, unfortunately, like you said in your presentation, sometimes they pick the one you don't want.
Mhm.
So don't show anything that's complete garbage. They
Yeah,
may pick
yeah,
it.
that's the takeaway.
Have you ever wanted to work for another company, and what makes you stay?
Um, sure, yeah. I think when I was younger, I actually was actively looking at other companies. There was a window. I think I could have had the shot to maybe move to a competitor. Um, but part of it, no, I shouldn't say it, but yeah, I have. And then what has kept me with GK is just luckily things have changed enough that there's always something new, always something different. Like I showed you the boats, the snowmobiles, that I had no idea we were going to do those. But those came up, and so they ended up being really fun and really successful. Um, the sled was like, yeah, went to Russia to design a sled. I can't, I'm not going to pass that up. So I'm going to take it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the variety, I would assume, kind of helps keep you invigorated,
For sure. Oh yeah.
considering it's such a what some might consider very corporate work. It's that it's not
Hmm.
just one widget, if you will.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Um, okay, we got a question about when you are researching who you're talking to. Are you looking for stuff in their job titles? Do you go deeper? like this person likes fishing, so you bring up, more details. How do you choose what to bring up and what levels of research you do within your stakeholders?
I say do your research. I don't mean like, compile a dossier on people. That's maybe a little extreme. I don't know if you have time for that. But definitely, yeah, from our point of view, our cast of characters is pretty static. So, over time you build up a relation and you kind of know what they're into. And sometimes the Japanese guys know them from Japan, like our domestic employees know them. So they have a little bit of insight. And that's kind of what I mean. You just do what you can. If you know that they like certain things, it's basic, it's icebreaker stuff. You don't have to go all in and trying to, talk to them about where they went to school. If there's something you have in common or something like that, you can use that. But like I said, it's not really something that you go too involved into.
Definitely. I would say that that's probably a good balance when it's someone you do know and you're trying to get a little maybe deeper of a rapport versus just trying to break the ice for sure.
Right.
Do you consider taking notes while you're doing a presentation unprofessional? The student claims to have a bad memory and likes to write things down during a presentation to make sure. What do you think about that, and how can that work, or how would you suggest working around that?
Personally, I was a crazy note taker. I've got little yellow pads from when I started that are just filled with pages and pages of handwritten notes. And then, the guys I work with, some of the guys I work with never take a note whatsoever, or never taken notes. And, they end up scratching their heads and going, oh, what happened in the meeting? Or I think this happened. And it's like, I can always point back at my, my papers and go, no. This is what we did. This is what we talked about. We got to hit this. So from my point of view, I think it's great. You do what you can. Maybe if you feel like it's rude or if it's like you're not paying attention, your phone can record, so you can always take a recording. I don't think anybody would have any problem with that, and it's not as obtrusive, obviously. So, yeah, I personally, I don't think taking notes is a negative in any way. It definitely helps.
It's really funny you brought up using the phone, and when we were talking, I know one of the, when we were going to school and coming up through, the obvious is the little yellow notepads or
Yeah.
that, and then the transition to taking digital notes. I think there is the potential of coming off looking like you're fiddling with your phone.
Right.
However, I think the smart thought there is record. You've got the device. Yeah, no, I think that's a really smart suggestion. All right. What do you believe companies are look for with recent graduates and from design students looking for a job?
Is that just in general design or industrial product
Yeah,
design?
I mean, I would maybe go as broad as you can, but then obviously based on your experience of what GK hires.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, because the field of power sport designers is so small that we have to rely on methodology. We have to rely on process, and a little bit of skill, and then and unfortunately a little bit of a hunch sometimes, that with these people somebody we're going to take on is going to get it, because it takes a definite mentality to be in the power sports industry. In terms of design wide, I still think, with caveats, obviously, but I think in general, being able to explain yourself is always going to be better than the flash, than having anything flashy. You can have a flashy portfolio, but if you can't explain why or what you did, if you can't build that story around it, I don't know if you're going to get really much interest. The only industry that I know of that really emphasizes flash, and not to put them down, but automotive is the only thing I can think of where it comes down to who's got the craziest looking renderings and craziest newest style. I think in general for product design, the explaining a process, stating the problem, how you addressed it, and then having an attractive solution is never going to go out of style.
I think that's great. Yeah, when you get into that core and meat of the industry, you really need to be able to communicate back. How do you deal with, let's say, a customer, or in your case, one of the stakeholders just doesn't respond to anything, wants to change it all? How do you tend to sway or repeat back to them, or get them to see that it's not all lost? Or do you step away and go, we're going to try again?
Yeah, in our situation, we basically have to go back to the drawing board. It's we try to salvage what we can, and that's where the communication comes back into play, where you try to have that dialogue. It's if whoever it is just says, back to I mentioned it briefly, but if they say, I don't like this, then okay, you don't like it, but is it because of this or that, or what is this? Does this remind you of something? And sometimes that doesn't work. I'll be honest. Sometimes there's no give and take, so you just got to go back and
Start over.
do it again, basically. So unfortunately, that does happen. So
yeah. In the presentations that you've been involved in, do you have, is it often done at independent? Do you do group presentations, or where you'll have staggered presentations, or is it just done through leadership?
I'm not following the question. Like, staggered in what way?
Well, in the sense of, like, say, maybe you would present your idea, then another designer, or you would have multiple team members present at a time.
Oh, I see. No, we've always tried to have just one voice and go through it. Sometimes we've had other people, each individual. I'm not a fan of that, to be honest, because I think it's confusing. Hopefully the guy presenting can actually do the presentation, but I think when you have different people presenting it, you lose focus. Your audience loses focus, and it comes down to not the work, but actually the style of whoever's presenting at that moment. So there's just, I guess, in a way, we just want to be fair and give everybody an equal shot of the work, give it a chance to succeed.
The loss of continuity can be a challenge to the listener, if you will.
I think so. Yeah, that's the main concern.
Gotcha. We have a student that wanted to know, how long did it take you to get to where you are now? I think we kind of addressed that with it when he graduated, but where do you feel like you turned a corner in going from design to design leadership? I think maybe that might be a...
Oh, I see. Geez, I don't know. I think I think after I had a couple units in production, I think after being through the process a couple of times, I could see what had to be done, and I could understand where the end game was, and then how to navigate to that. And over time, younger guys come in, older guys go out, and you end up being the only guy. I don't want to say that's, just survivorship is not it only, but definitely, seeing the process through, and then understanding what is necessary and how to navigate it successfully, definitely gave me that insight, and I was able to kind of step away and kind of direct at that point.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so we have a student that asked if they are scared of talking in front of people, which we have a few in here. Do you have any like recommendations as to how to push yourself or to improve those skills?
Yeah, I wish I could say something specific. I mean, I don't know what I did. I wasn't a public speaker. I was never a public speaker. I think I took public speaking at Cal State once, and I just walked off the stage. I couldn't deal with it. So I don't know. Something clicked, I guess, when I had to present design work. I guess I would say practice. Whoever's out there, the most low key presentation the most low stress, I should say, is the presentations you make in school, make in class, because everybody there is in the same boat. All of your peers are, they all have you guys all share the same experience level. So, there's no, how do you say it? And it's not that there's no risk really. So
The stakes are lower.
Thank you. Yeah. So if, get that practice in when you're in school, because you don't want to learn how to public speak when you're on the job. That's the last place you want to do it. So get it in, figure out what works. For me, it was, raising my voice and projecting my voice it helps, because it I guess it makes you feel empowered, but it commands attention too. So that's a step. So, and you don't know that until you do it. So practice, I guess is the key.
Absolutely. I'd like to throw a couple out there since we've got a few of them going next week. One, since you're doing presentations online, hop on your personal Zoom and hit record. Do your presentation and then play it back to yourself. You will find what are the words you're tripping up on.
Yeah.
What are the parts of a presentation that you just don't feel comfortable with? Then you have something to practice. The other thing, and I believe I mentioned it maybe a week or so ago, is breathe. I think that is one of the hardest things I've seen, is that people their chest gets tight and they willow in, they can't breathe, and I had a student almost pass out because they just stopped breathing. It seems like the simplest tip, but that is something I think a lot of us let go out of our heads sometimes. All right, we're going to ask you a couple more questions if you're willing. And if yes, and Jenna mentioned a really good point, is Toastmasters, which I believe our guest speaker last week mentioned. She took Toastmasters, and that is, you get up and you talk for 5 minutes about anything. It's a really, there's different levels of it, but it's a really good way to just get yourself out there with fairly low stakes. Sure. Everybody's rooting for you. All right, you mentioned that some people just want to tear you down. Do you often run into audiences that are difficult to communicate with, and what do you do?
Yeah, when I mean tear you down, I think, there's always, maybe you've seen it, but there's always an engineer or, sales guy that just is like, well, why are you doing that? Or, this isn't going to work, or it's overly negative. And there's not a lot you could do. You just have to understand that, maybe it's not motivated. And it goes back to, you can't take it personally. So
Right.
you just, when you get to that level of discourse, you try to answer the question, and if that doesn't answer, if it's not enough, then there's nothing you can do about that. Try to move on, try to make it work. Just go do your business. That's what you're there for. So
Right. I think one of our next questions kind of taps into that same idea of when somebody's not willing to compromise, and whether you're right or wrong is, I think a good idea is to potentially reiterate from a communication standpoint, the points you have all agreed are the
right.
key points. And so maybe that person particularly will not budge. Generally, those people have somebody they report to, and when they continually hear that they're addressing all your concerns, what's your problem?
That's
And,
exactly right. I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
and sometimes you just have to, it's a lost cause, but if you
Mhm.
continue to put out there what you have agreed upon as to what you're doing, it can be a
Right.
very, it's a stronger tactic than fighting back
Oh yeah.
in a personal level. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so since you don't have clients, I'll say stakeholders, do you have issues with stakeholders disagreeing with each other than, let's say, yourself, but that they are not agreeing on what's going on in the process? How do you get involved or stay out of from a design standpoint?
Yeah. No, that's actually fairly not common, but it happens for sure, especially a company like Yamaha. There'll be disagreement between planning and sales. Or sales and engineering. And as design, you don't really have a say in the matter. You're just kind of, unfortunately, you can't sway it. You have, I don't want to say you don't have any power. That's not probably the wrong word to say, but you just have to let them duke it out and hope that it doesn't affect the vision or what you've been working on too badly. Yeah, I wish. Yeah, you just kind of have to stand back, really. In my case, at least.
Yeah. I think we've found every once in a while you can support with, again, some of those, like, hey, this is what we agreed on kind of thing,
Sure.
to
Yeah.
get them back on track. But sometimes it's, again, that's back to the lost cause where
Right.
you just hope the project moves forward afterwards.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, Julio, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for spending your Thursday night with us and answering questions and helping students continue to see the importance of communication as a skill beyond the pixel pushing, as you put it.
Great.
We appreciate so much having our alumni stay back in touch and come back and show where our students can go, who they can reach out to, and continue to be a part of our industry that keeps growing.
Sure. My pleasure.
Thank you very much. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks, Julio.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank
Everybody.
you.